Hi guys, welcome to Full Time Devils. I'm your host Jay. With me is the chief football writer from the Times, Henry Winter. Henry, thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about United's season, unfortunately, because we know it's been a disappointing season. Henry, you've been covering United closely for many years, and you've been covering this roller coaster journey this season. So we're going to look at the season. It's almost been like a three-act play, if you will, this season. You've had Jose, the time under Jose this season, early in the season. We had Ole coming in and the success that he had, that phenomenal run, culminating, the pinnacle was Paris, of course. And then we've had the latter part of the season, which has been pretty terrible, if we're being honest, from a United fan point of view. I'm going to start going back to the beginning of the season. In pre-season, there were signs that things weren't great with Jose, and just from your point of view, from sort of seeing him closely and in the press conferences and speaking to him, did you get the impression that this could be problematic? This could be like third season syndrome with Jose?
Well, everyone talks about third season syndrome, and also you have to remember this is magnified because he's at Manchester United. The Manchester United, the demands on the manager are different certainly from the demands of anyone else in this country, and probably for any club apart from Real Madrid. Okay, so he's been through Real Madrid. But if you look at what Mourinho, any manager at Manchester United, has to deal with after a match, they probably have about an hour of commitments. So they might want to be spending time with their family, maybe spending time with the players, but actually they've got to go and talk to us lot, they've got to go and talk to all the overseas broadcasters, they've got to go and do sort of assorted corporate things, going seeing the latest noodle sponsors, all of that. So you can almost, at a time when a manager probably needs to gather his thoughts, talk to his coaches, also welcome the opposing coach, that hour is written off. That is the type of pressure that the manager is under. That's also reflected in pre-season. I know Ed Woodward, to be fair, has slightly tried to address it, but the demands on Manchester United for commercially and community, which is obviously really important in pre-season for where they go around. I mean, that's absolutely huge. I mean, we have to remember Manchester United are the biggest club in the country in terms of the demands on the manager, in terms of the corporate element. So it has to be placed in the context. This is a job with more stresses than any other in the country. As David Moyes found out, he sat in that swivel chair, got all excited and then froze. Van Gaal, I saw win the Champions League. What a fantastic manager. Again, he found it just a little bit too much. Mourinho had won the Champions League twice. He can cope with it. Partly individual psychological flaws on Mourinho's account. I couldn't understand why he didn't want to move to Manchester. Why not live in Manchester's a brilliant city. Okay, so I'm from the south, but I spent a lot of time in Manchester. What brilliant, Manchester's a really buzzing city. What a great place to live in, whether you're out in Alderley Edge or whether you're in town. It's a good place to live. He should have moved up there. Didn't understand that. That sent out a bad message. Also, Mourinho is a very charming individual, but he's also quite a sort of dark, moody individual as well. And I think he could walk down a corridor and there might be a young player there, a cleaner, someone who works in the canteen, whose life revolves around Manchester United, and for the Manchester United manager to walk past them and not acknowledge them, that is cold, and that affects the atmosphere, affects them, it affects their ability to contribute. Ferguson would have walked down that corridor, seen even a 13-year-old kid in the academy, he would go, how's your father, how's his job, or whatever. Ferguson would know everything about them, they would know their names. Just little sort of common courtesies like that. And I think Manchester United, for all this image that we portray of them in the media as this huge, great organisation, which they are, there's still a family in the middle of it, There's still people around the training ground who, this is their home. And they want to be treated with just that little bit of respect by the manager, whether it's the players, whether it's the canteen staff, whether it's ground staff, whether it's a 13-year-old kid in the academy. And I think Mourinho, partly because of the scale of the job, partly because of flaws in his own character, he didn't do that. And that is why I think the whole club eventually turned against Mourinho as well as some players.
You mentioned that the whole club and some players, it seemed early on in the season, even before the season started, he was at odds with almost everyone. He was mentioning certain players, Pogba, Martial, he didn't seem happy with.
Yeah,
Sure. He was mentioning some of the younger players, how they weren't going to get a chance. He kept having these sort of sly digs at the board. What was your impression? Did it seem to you as though he was taking on everyone?
You can't do that with a modern player. The modern player is a different beast nowadays. When Ferguson started out and the players that he came in and deal with, he could call them out, he could challenge them. You can't do that with a modern player. partly because the modern player is a more sensitive individual, partly because they're quicker to run to their agent and to their social media account. And some is, okay, an individual. I mean, I really like Luke Shaw. I think he's a really interesting individual. I admire him as a man, I admire him as a footballer. I think he could be potentially one of the best left backs in the world. But this is a kid, remember how his youth, but also his personality is quite sensitive, but also he came back from, that was one of the horrible injuries. Yeah. That would have broken a lesser man. And I just think that Luke Shaw, with his personality and with his injury record, I think what he needed just was a little bit of love from Mourinho. And I think Mourinho should have given that to him. But we've seen it in Mourinho in the past. At Chelsea, he would challenge Joe Cole. And the best way to get, probably the best out of Joe Cole, is to show a bit of love. Some players in the modern era, I think you can challenge them, you can shout at them and they respond. But I think Mourinho needs to go away and look at his man management.
Because you mentioned Shaw, at one point it seemed like Shaw could do no right, even when he played well. Mourinho, Jose was saying, that's because I've sort of told him what to do. He doesn't know what to do, so I'm having to tell him. There was the thing with Martial when he just had a baby.
Yeah.
It seemed he was sort of almost turning the fans onto the players' side because of the way he was acting.
But also, if you rewind it seems a lifetime ago that Ferguson was there. Ferguson was the master of man management. Ferguson was absolutely brilliant. Little things like, so Peter Schmeichel had a busy summer and he was, there was a lot of pressure on him because he's such an outstanding goalkeeper. Ferguson would give him, say, just go and take a few days off. Just go and have a look. Ferguson was absolutely the master. He was like a sports psychologist and a sports scientist rolled into one. He could read when a player was having a dip, whether emotionally or physically. And Mourinho was poor at that, which was surprising because actually early in his career, he actually, like Lampard, he turned Lampard from a very good player into a world beater purely by stepping into the showers with him at Cobham and said, you can be one of the best in the world. And Lampard puffed out his chest and said, right, I'm going to go and do that. So Mourinho slightly lost his way. Mourinho's a very good manager, but I think Manchester United got him at the wrong time. He was still scarred or whatever. And I felt sorry for the Manchester United players. I know there's instinctively not so much sympathy for players because they're so well paid, and also they are wearing the shirt and they should go out, whoever the manager is, whether they hate him, whether they love him, they should go out and give everything. But I did have sympathy with Luke Shaw in particular. Paul Pogba, slightly less so. I think there were one or two tactical reasons why Mourinho should have used him better, as well as man management. And I think for Martial as well, if you're having a child, show a little bit of sympathy. This is not 20 years ago. This is the modern player now, and they need a bit more love.
Just quickly on Pogba, that was, from a United fan point of view, that was a really disappointing thing because Pogba had won the World Cup, and we thought, great, we've got this World Cup winning midfielder. If we can get Pogba firing on all cylinders, he could spearhead a title challenge. And yet, him and Mourinho just seemed completely at odds from the off. Was it a case of 6 one half dozen the other, or do you blame one more than the other?
You see, I had an issue with Valencia being captain. I think a club of Manchester United stature should have someone who speaks English. I also quite liked if it's someone who has come up through the ranks, which Pogba, I know he went abroad, but went back abroad. But I think it would have been a masterstroke, and I wrote it, and quite rightly everyone ignored me as usual at the start of the season. What a good idea! Why not make Pogba captain? Why not say, right, I'm going to build this team around this World Cup winner, emotionally and tactically. And I think if you saw, and because the French Federation released the footage of Pogba's, I'm a journalist, I'm English, I have no dog in the fight of the World Cup final. I was obviously there in Moscow. But what Pogba said, it was fantastic. All those French players standing around, it was, I can't use the word Agincourt with the French, but there was really something sort of uplifting about, maybe I should use Agincourt with French, but there was something incredibly uplifting, and Pogba's got that in him. Pogba, I think he just quite rightly wants respect. The other thing about Pogba is if you talk to the younger players at Manchester United, they all really look up to him. He is their leader. All the sort of social media stuff, kids like that. I don't have a problem with haircuts and emojis and social media elements. Just go and do it. That's part of the modern world. But Mourinho's relationship with Pogba was a huge problem. Also, if you're Ed Woodward and if you're in the commercial side of the the one who generates the most money is Pogba. You go into a club shop, you'd have been in it many times. Pogba. I mean, Pogba is absolutely huge. With young players around the world, he is massive. And I just think Mourinho, that was probably well, he made a few mistakes, but I would say that on man-to-man management, as well as Luke Shaw, his handling of Paul Pogba, and just almost looking on him as the enemy, was actually, if he'd made him the heartbeat of the club, which Pogba could have been, absolutely could have been, and said, listen, and just appealed to, with a lot of modern players, appealed to their vanity and said, listen, you just won a World Cup. We want to build around you. Here's the armband. Here's the place in a 4-3-3 Matic is going to hold off Herrera or whoever's going to do all the running around you. We are going to build through you. And surprise, surprise, the first thing that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer did when he arrived, Operation Pogba. And he just worked on him.
We will get to Ole later about that as well. But yeah, you're right. One thing that sort of some fans still respect Mourinho for, or a lot of fans do like about Mourinho, is he would have a dig at the board. He would take the Glazers to task about transfers, which from a fan point of view we quite liked. And it was obvious in pre-season, going into the season, he wasn't happy about transfers, and he made that pretty clear. Yeah. And also in some of his tactics in the early games, with like Herrera at centre-back, McTominay at centre-back, it was like he was doing it deliberately to send a message, because we seldom have three centre-backs at United, and yet he was saying, I'm playing these midfielders because I didn't get the centre-back that I wanted. What did you make of that?
Well, first I thought it was a little bit petty and childish and self-defeating, if you're going to say, just to send a message out. You know, it's one thing using a press conference to send a message out to the Glazers, but to use a team sheet to send a message out to the Glazers, and then if it can backfire on you in terms of results. But I have complete sympathy, and he's being confirmed with hindsight. But you know what? This is nothing new. This is, when Mourinho turned up, I'm sure one or two of the local Manchester journalists sort of pointed out to him and said, there's a long-running problem here in terms of recruitment. And this actually predates Moyes. I mean, if you look at Sir Alex Ferguson's last major signing, arguably, Robin van Persie, that was an individual just to do a job for that season, to get Ferguson that title, and it didn't work out because of a Turkish referee and nanny, but actually pushed for the Champions League. But that was a recognition of the issues in the squad, and which has been, and the Glazers are culpable there. The Woodward is culpable there. The Glazers, I have huge respect for the Manchester United supporters and Manchester United Supporters Trust, who've been banging on about the Glazers and the fact they've been taking money out of the club and not investing properly, and more importantly, not putting a proper structure in place. I mean, if I'm allowed to mention Liverpool and Manchester City,
of course,
they have got the type of structures that Manchester United should have had, particularly in the post-Ferguson world and particularly in the post-David Gill world. And they need that. And Mourinho, although he's not a natural fan of a sporting director of football, he needed someone like that in to recruit properly and to actually get the Glazers to actually start funding, putting money into the transfer kitty, and stop taking money out of the club.
Because at the moment, I mean, it all seems a little bit vague. I mean, people are saying that is Ed Woodward making the decisions. Are you any clear on who is saying?
It's Woodward.
Woodward's
the problem.
One saying.
I watch so many programmes and I read so many pieces. I go on the fans' website, and I'm going, okay, and they're also listing the problems with Manchester United. Ed Woodward is the problem with Manchester United from a footballing perspective. From a commercial perspective, he's the Messi of merchandising. He has, I mean, you've seen his office in London. I mean, it's formidable, the money that he generates. He's an absolute genius at that. But he's not a football man. He's not an experienced football man. He hasn't got necessarily, he's got the contacts, but has he necessarily got the respect of all the other clubs? Does he really know the good young players coming through that they can get? Why should Manchester United, the biggest, most famous club in this country, a wealthy club, not beat Manchester City and Liverpool for certain players? You have to start targeting 22, 23, 24-year-olds. I can understand why he wants the sort of the big superstar signing, because it's good commercially. Manchester United shouldn't be doing that. Manchester United should be signing players on the way up, not when they're established. They want hungry players. There is an issue with the character in the Manchester United dressing room. You want hungrier players. And personally, I've always felt this, And look, few people, closer to Manchester United in terms of sort of people who watch them on a regular basis, and I've got a fair few mates who are Manchester United fans, but they say, and this is right, the Glazers have created a culture at Manchester United which is just about money, because the Glazers, the way they bought the club was all basically using Manchester United money, payments in kind, all that, to finance their deal, their buyout. If it's all about money, and if at the top the culture is simply about money, then the players are going to say, well, hang on a sec, if the owners, the Glazers, their focus is simply on swelling their own coffers, why shouldn't we? So you suddenly see all these demands for bigger deals, obviously also complicated when Alexis Sanchez came in on those sort of sums. So the culture is wrong at Manchester United, and Ed Woodward, I've had lunch with him, I've talked to him, probably not recently, because I think he's one of the big problems. He has to realise that. He has to step away from the football side, because often you find when businessmen come around the dressing room, particularly if they're fans of that club or have become fans of the club, their judgment just goes all over the place. You need an experienced Monchi type, an experienced Mitchell, whoever, and Edwards like he is at Liverpool. Begiristain obviously came in up through the ranks at Barcelona and went into Manchester City. You need a proper football man driving the football operation, not someone who's brilliant at doing deals. But look, what I'm saying here is just A, it's obvious, and B, fans far closer to the situation than I am have been saying it for longer.
Do you think Darren Fletcher could be that man?
Do you know, I really like Darren. Of all the individuals' names who've been thrown into the equation, Darren Fletcher strikes me as having that analytical, Scottish, because I mean he's just a deep thinker about the game, so he could do it, but has he got the contacts? Can he pick up the phone and know how Raiola works, what sort of stunts he's going to pull in negotiations, so you don't have to pay ridiculously over the odds to get a player? It's got to be someone experienced, particularly if you've got an inexperienced manager. You need someone to. I also think it's probably best at the moment. I love the logic of, and I think it particularly works at a club like Manchester United, where you have people in the heart of the club who have Manchester United red in their bloodstream, and that's why I'm a supporter of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. But I do think you're going to need to have someone coming in from the outside and ripping apart that squad, and so you can't have someone who's got a connection with them.
Going back to sort of, yeah, of course. Just going towards the end of Jose's time at Old Trafford, obviously the results had been a bit up and down. We'd had a couple of good results, Juventus in particular, and then obviously the Manchester derby, and then the game at Liverpool Anfield, which was terrible. Were you surprised when you heard that Jose was getting sacked? Was that a shock, or did you think this has been
a lot of people have been writing it? I don't cover every Manchester United game. I probably cover every other one. Not completely surprised, because you knew the atmosphere had slightly turned toxic within Carrington, you know. And football clubs, it doesn't take a lot to make people happy at a football club. Obviously, results are important, but a smile, a bit of respect. You know, clubs now are so two-tiered. You've got multi-millionaires, and then you've got a lot of staff, you know, who work at reception, Kath, people like that, who probably not pay much, but they do it because they absolutely love the club. And the quid pro quo of that is that the multi-millionaires, when they go through, show them respect. So someone who say a couple of players I admire, Chris Smalling and Marcus Rashford, you know, when they turn up at Carrington, they'll talk to staff. And absolutely so they should. Any workplace, your workplace, my workplace, you say hi to everyone. It's common courtesy. Yeah. And I just think that the atmosphere had turned toxic. It had gone cold. Mourinho was sort of famously sort of walking through reception and not acknowledging people, and it was a club that was eating itself. But Mourinho obviously had his own flaws, and he poured fuel on the fire that was burning there. But if you want to look at the big major long-term problems at Manchester United, Mourinho was a symptom as much as the cause.
Obviously,
excuse me,
Ole was announced as caretaker manager. When you first heard that, what did you make of that appointment? Did you think that's the right idea as a caretaker rather than as obviously.
I thought it made a lot of sense because caretakers are often the complete antithesis of the person they're replacing, and in Solskjaer's case, an antidote. He came in and immediately turned up famously with the chocolates for the. If Norway does chocolates for the staff there, brought some warmth back. Operation Pogba kicked in, make Pogba smile, build a team around him, work on that tactical connection between Pogba and Rashford, which you saw particularly in the second half against Tottenham at Wembley, which worked. That Pogba, that ball through, and just get them smiling again. Clearly the players have got to take responsibility for their own performances, whatever they think. But I just think that Solskjaer just brought the smiles back. But look, at that point, his main strength was he wasn't Jose Mourinho.
Am I right in thinking that you sort of championed Pochettino as a Manchester United? If I remember it, you writing that Pochettino was your sort of choice, or should be the choice for Manchester United long term, or the permanent boss.
Sure, I think a lot of people were, because Pochettino is, it upsets Spurs when you write things like that. But Pochettino is an outstanding individual. But yeah, I could understand the logic of Solskjaer, and then like everyone else, I got totally caught up in this sort of suddenly blossoming love affair, not realising it might just be a sort of summer romance, and you've got sort of, bills to pay or whatever sort of issues to do when the sort of the thrill of the first kiss has faded. But then there was Paris, and you look at that, and I think Paris was brilliant. Okay, you can argue VAR and whatever, but actually that's how Manchester United should play. And for those of us, I've been doing this since '86. For those of us who sort of basically raised on the Ferguson era as reporters, that's how Manchester United should play. Fearless, pace, width, going for it, youth as well. Obviously Rashford was terrific that night. So that was great. So I probably absolutely got caught up in it. So I might have championed Pochettino for a week, but I could understand the love affair at all levels with Solskjaer. I just think, everyone says, let's go with an experienced manager, but you did in Van Gaal, you did in Mourinho, and it didn't work. Okay, Mourinho left you with a couple of trophies. Van Gaal left you. We won the cup, didn't he?
The FA Cup, his last game.
He won the FA Cup.
It was the FA Cup final.
Yeah, and Mourinho got 2 trophies.
Yeah, the League Cup and the Europa.
Don't
tell him that though, because he always does the three. Yeah, but we're not counting the Charity Shield. We're not at that stage.
I know. You're too big for that. They did go with some trophies, but still, major managers who worked at major clubs, struggled. So why not try a kid? Why not try one of your own? And that's why I will back Ollie. I've got a lot of time for him. He may be out of his depth, but actually I think you've got someone in there whose eyes are wide open, whose heart beats Manchester United, who understands the fabled DNA of the club, who has sat through hundreds of Ferguson team talks, which basically distill what Manchester United should be about: hard work, collectivity, not letting your teammate down, not letting the fans down, honouring the shirt, attacking. All those famous Ferguson team talks. Solskjaer was raised on those. And so he understands. Now, I'm not saying that, Solskjaer's his own man. This idea that he's a cipher for Alex Ferguson is just unfair and patronising and wrong, and underestimates Solskjaer. But actually, bringing back some of Ferguson's values, Busby's values, Manchester United's essential values. If Solskjaer's going to do that, great. But the job is so huge. The job is about a technical director coming in and sorting out that squad, and then Solskjaer, because of the strength of his personality, because of his likability, and don't underestimate, he's got a tactical mind in there. It'd be patronising to say he hadn't. You saw that in the Tottenham game and a few others. And then just let him get on and work with the players. I quite like the way that he's already promoted some of his younger players. Start the season, halfway through the season, we had to do who was going to be our young player for 2019. I went Mason Greenwood. I was toying with going for James Garner.
Yeah,
I really like him. I just think that I've watched him a couple of times behind closed doors. I got invited in and watched excuse me, at Carrington. I was going, what a kid he is, because he plays with his head up. And I tell you what, if you talk to him, he's got quite a strong Scouse accent. So actually,
not all that against him.
I think he's from the Wirral.
Yeah.
He's got that, and fair play to him. He's obviously he's Manchester United through and through, but actually, he's obviously a strong character. And I don't know where he's going to play. For me, he looks like a holding midfielder because he's got a tackle on him, and he can look up, read a pass, play it simply. You need a successor for Matic, and with Herrera obviously going as well. So honestly, and that's great. And Solskjaer saw that immediately. And I think Greenwood started the last game of the season against Cardiff, and Garner was on the bench.
Yeah, Greenwood. A lot of United fans on this channel were massive fans of Mason Greenwood. I think that's a kid with a lot of potential. He's been banging, I think, 30 goals for the academy this season.
But I understand that, and the media are even more guilty of sort of hyping up the next young thing. I did it with Makeda. I mean, we can go back to that. But let's have a little bit of respect for Rashford, because I think Rashford's been carrying an injury for the last few weeks of the season, and I think he's one of your most important players. You should build around him. Solskjaer obviously believes that, leaving Lukaku on the bench. So absolutely right for the media and for fans to champion Greenwood, but let's not forget Marcus Rashford.
No, not at all. We're always waxing lyrical about Marcus Rashford, and we've been saying this about his injury. You can see he's carrying on, and he's one of those players that will play through an injury. Yeah. He seems to give his all
he's a true red.
For United, and that's as a fan, that's what you want to see.
Also, from England's perspective, if you're Marcus Rashford will play for England for the next 10 years, and he will be playing at the top level. Obviously, we've seen him in the World Cup. He'll be playing in the Nations League. He'll be playing in Europe next season, and then going into to probably at least two more World Cups, and that will just make him better and better. And from Manchester United's perspective, obviously that's good from a footballing perspective, but also even more marketable to have one of England's three strikers, which will be Kane, Sterling, and Rashford when they're all fit. I mean, he's huge. And he's a very impressive individual. You can see him developing physically, sharper. He still needs to work on, one-on-one. But, he's a kid who wants to learn. So let's not underestimate him.
No, not at all. And I think people forget sometimes that despite the fact he's had a few seasons, he's still only a young lad. Just one final word on that sort of early period on Ole. Did it catch you by surprise at all because of how impressive that run was? Because even as a United fan, I think it was 9 away victories on the spin. Yeah. Turning it around after the 2-0 home loss in Paris. Even as a United fan, you were like, wow, I did not see this coming. As you mentioned, you've covered this for sort of 30 odd years.
Yeah, although the media gets carried away very quickly, and I was guilty of it. Partly because we like a change of narrative. And, we've been criticising Mourinho. And suddenly, the clouds are gone, the sunshine came out, we had our sunglasses on, we were just sort of relaxing, and we're in Paris. So, and the whole sort of Paris thing, English football has a slightly sort of interesting relationship with PSG and all the money that they spend and how much of a real club are they? And then to see Manchester United go in there, and okay, with maybe one or two bounce of the ball, but blow them away, that was absolutely brilliant. Yeah. I thought that was great, particularly as a homegrown player like Rashford playing as well as he did. So absolutely surprised by the narrative in terms of the momentum, and absolutely delighted and carried away with it. Definitely guilty.
Yeah, you weren't alone. I think we were all thinking this could be it. We could be 20 years since Ollie scored the winner in 99, all the rest of it. We had a couple, I think United had a couple of losses. I think we lost to Arsenal, and then we lost, I think, to Wolves. And then the club announced, if memory serves, it was he'd been made permanent manager, which, okay, at the time we were still riding high in a way because we were still in the hunt for top four. There was still that buzz of the recent results, and we're still in the Champions League. What did you make of the timing of the announcement when the club said, I think, in March, was it? Yeah. Right, Ollie's.
I am in a minority of absolutely probably one now. Was I even looking back on it? Well, I think it was a good decision, because I think what it did was, well, first, if you are going to be sorting out contracts, sorting out players coming in, it doesn't happen the moment the day after the season ends. You can announce Solskjaer, day after, say, the Cardiff game, and permanent manager, and then a lot of work needs to be done. So I can understand where Woodward was coming from. Everyone said, well, it was an emotional decision, but actually when the decision was made that day, I don't think there was too much criticism of it. I think people could understand it. But he needs to do so much work to that squad that the quicker he felt, this is my squad, my reputation, not as a caretaker anymore, but as permanent manager, is based on what these 25, 26 players do. I've got to start working on who I want out and who I want brought in. So I have to say, look, there are many things to criticise the club and Woodward and the Glazers about at the moment. The appointment of Solskjaer at that time, if anything, it said something about the players, not about Solskjaer. I think it said something about the characters of some players, and maybe that crystallised Solskjaer's view of certain individuals even more, and made it even easier to say, right, I don't want you staying.
Do you think that there was an effect? Because there's been a bit of a debate amongst fans whether it had an effect on the players that they knew was the permanent manager, or whether it was, some claim it's fatigue setting in because they've been playing at such a high pace, some claim it's just...
Can't be fatigue.
Yeah.
Look at the two hardest working teams in the country, Liverpool, Manchester City.
Well, yeah.
Look at their stats. I'm sorry, I don't buy that.
No.
I actually look at some of the players, and I think Solskjaer needs a pre-season with them to get them fitter.
Yeah.
So I think some of them also need to look at themselves in the face and think, I'm not giving value for money.
We went from one extreme to the other, really. We had that amazing run under Ole, and then one of the worst runs in Manchester United's history. I mean, it was pretty staggering, the amount of games we lost, and even the games we won against West Ham and Watford. Yeah. The performances weren't great. What did you make of that, sort of covering this and seeing the teams was flying to going from one extreme to the other so quickly? I
thought I was at the Huddersfield game, that one. I wasn't at the Cardiff game, I was at the Huddersfield away. And I always think, looking at Manchester United away, I always think that's when the relationship between the team and the supporters is at its strongest, because I would say your away support is probably best in the country in terms of loyalty, in terms of noise, in terms of support, even when they're being served up absolute dross. But I thought it was very telling, the last 5 minutes, they just fell silent. And there's always been that element of defiance with Manchester United. We will sing through the bad times, and we will sing even if the team, even Midtjylland, I think that we'll sing and support the team. But it was like they turned on. They didn't want to be a Chelsea in the way they can turn on managers and certain players. But the fact that they fell silent, I was looking around the press box and I was saying, the Manchester United fans over to our right have just gone silent. And I just thought that was absolute telling. And I hope the players picked up on that. I hope the players realised that this was the hardcore Manchester United sport, who just travel. I mean, I've been out in Tokyo when you won the World Club Cup. And I was talking to some fans on the way back. I said, God, how much did it cost you to get out here? They said, well, it cost us thousands, but we've saved up. Whatever our job is, we've got to be here because we need to support Manchester United. That's when they need our support most. And I saw them. They're heading off to a bar in downtown Yokohama or wherever, singing "Bring on the Martians," because they're sort of, they conquered the world. Now that was the next step. So look, my admiration for them is huge. But when they fell silent, I thought, God, that is pretty flipping telling. And it's no surprise that the Manchester United players, like a Phil Jones, a Michael Carrick, 2, 3, 4 seasons ago, their one ambition almost for that season was to go and stand, with the away support, which I think they did against, Michael Carrick did against, I think he did against Liverpool at Anfield, and certainly the Burnley game, Burnley away, Turf Moor, I think he took his son. So absolutely, and that I thought, wow, that's worrying for Manchester United. That connection's gone. I mean, the atmosphere at Old Trafford is all, as with any stadium, is slightly different in terms of the. It's a different makeup of sport. You see that there are more tourists. No criticism of Manchester United. It happens at every club, Anfield, Etihad, Emirates, wherever you want to go. That is the nature of it. But the away support is strong, and it's strongest with Manchester United of all the clubs in this country. And I just thought that was absolutely telling. And 5 minutes later, we went into the press conference, and Solskjaer came in and said, "Some of these players aren't going to be here next season." And I could. It's like almost the fans had told them that. Yeah, well, we were at the game. We did the fan cams afterwards, and the fans were pretty deflated, as you can imagine. And then moving forward to the Cardiff game was when it was probably the most anti-Glazer, anti-Woodward sentiment I'd heard from Old Trafford for a little while, because there was a lot of. But do you hear it? Not a lot.
to be honest with you, but we heard it at the Cardiff game, and that for me it stood out as one of the first times in a few years, because obviously we had the 2005 when they took over the anti-Glazer campaign.
Yeah.
We had the green and gold campaign, but it sort of fizzled out a little bit.
I'm amazed. Look, you don't want to target individuals, but I'm amazed there haven't been more chance about Woodward.
Well, that's why it stood out a little bit, because there was
last game of the season.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but there was a anti-Woodward, anti-Glazer, build a bonfire and all the rest of it, and I'd not heard that for a little while. So.
You know, one of the things, I think a lot of fans are expressing dissent towards clubs on social media rather than necessarily. I'm amazed, and I've been writing about Woodward for a long time, and the club complain, and I'm going, well, I'll say, this is, if I talk to fans individually, one of the first things they say is, oh, Woodward.
Yeah.
You know, look, you don't want to bring all the problems down to, look, Woodward's got the heart, the club's, he wants to do right by the club, but he is the Glazers' man.